I didn't know it was possible to get so much comedy out of a goldfish, but apparently it is. Fish Story is the second episode of Back to You, directed, of course, by the wonderful James Burrows. And there will be spoilers from now as I talk about what happens in this episode. I'm going to go through things chronologically and share some thoughts along the way. But to sum up, first of all, very briefly, absolutely loved it. It starts off with Chuck looking for Kelly, and we get a fun anecdote about an orange with Marsh. I rather liked how that played out in the episode. I don't have too many thoughts on that in particular, but I liked what Marsh brought to this episode. Chuck then approaches Kelly and he wants to talk about Gracie. Kelly doesn't want to talk about his role or potential role as Gracie's father, and there are a lot of cheap shots being fired between the two of them. I lost count. I think I stopped counting at about 4, but there are a lot. My favourite is the retort after, "I'm sorry I invaded your personal space by a few inches." I won't say what Kelly's retort is, but I absolutely loved it. Several other cheap shots. We then have a team meeting, and this is something I mentioned in my discussion of the pilot, but I'm really enjoying the fact that we have a lot of different characters, a lot of different personalities, and that gives us so much scope for different people's opinions and so much scope for a lot of witty remarks. And we have discussions between them bouncing back and forth. People are talking over each other, and it's so effective. And I'm really thoroughly enjoying that. Chuck is given a fish by the station, and I have to say, if I ever start a new job and somebody gives me a fish, I wouldn't be very happy, but nevertheless he takes the fish and the argument with Kelly continues. Kelly then leaves the room and we find out that the fish has died. And Chuck doesn't want Kelly to think that he can't even look after a fish. This is just after she sees him overfeeding the fish. So he asks Ryan to get him another goldfish. There is apparently a tank somewhere else in the building with multiple goldfish in it. So he sends Ryan to get a replacement. And Ryan, just the image of Ryan scuttling back with his hands clamped over a cup, obviously with a goldfish inside of it, is absolutely fabulous. He deposits the fish into the fishbowl. The fish is dead. And this is our second victim. And this is because Chuck added cold water to the fishbowl, and extreme temperature changes can cause cardiac arrest in fish, apparently, which is pretty interesting to learn if you have an interest in fish, or if you're starting to have an interest in fish. This episode is not really a guide on how to look after fish, but it's definitely a guide on how to not look after a fish. And this fish is dead, so Ryan goes off again to get a third fish. And this is my favourite point. This is my favourite fish victim, if you like, because it's in a coffee cup and Chuck is holding this cup and Marsh comes along and tops up his coffee cup with a pot of coffee, not knowing that there's a fish in it. However, he then declares when he's talking to, I think it was Montana, that he thought he just saw a fish in a coffee cup and he doesn't know what's real anymore. This is in reference to the orange trick that he was talking about. And I love that so much. I love the fact that we then have the image of Marsh pouring the coffee into the coffee cup and seeing the goldfish, but not thinking to question it. And is just accepting it and moving on. And I love that. I think that's brilliant. Of course, there we have our fourth fish victim. We then have the news broadcast, and we have a little bit of time to focus on Gary. Gary had a little llama run up to him, and it caused a lot of embarrassment, so he's trying to find a way to shake that off and get a new image or something for people to talk about that's maybe more favourable. So he gets tased live on the news by a police officer who's demonstrating this new taser, and I think the performance there is really brilliant. I love the fact that after being tased he couldn't speak. I think the vocal performance there was really strong, really effective, and they didn't milk it too much either. I think in the wrong hands they could have extended that longer than necessary, but I think it got just the right amount of screen time. We then are back in the studio or in the building, and Ryan is getting another fish, so our fifth fish, and this one dies as well in a pretty dramatic way. And the next thing we know, Kelly is alone in the office. She shoves the desk. She shoves, I think, some papers on the desk. The fishbowl topples off, and of course she rushes to find out what's gone on and to find out if the fish is okay. Of course, we know the fish is dead, but she didn't know the fish was dead. And she thinks she's killed the fish, and Chuck comes in at that moment. And I think from the point of Kelly knocking the fishbowl over until the end of that part of the episode, which is pretty much taking us up to the end, I don't think I expected any of it to play out the way it did. Kelly obviously apologises to Chuck, says the fish is dead, says she'll get him a new fish, and then Chuck is hugging her, and Ryan, I love Ryan's role in this. Ryan had been sent to get a replacement fish, to get, I think that would be the 6th fish now. And while Chuck is hugging Kelly, her back is to the door, Ryan comes in, puts the new live fish in the fishbowl, and of course when Kelly turns around, she sees the live fish in the bowl, but she had just moments before witnessed Chuck throwing the dead fish, fish number 5, into the bin. So of course she's baffled that there's now a live swimming fish in the fishbowl, and she looks in the bin, and she sees all of the fish. And just with the image of Marsh seeing the fish in the coffee cup, I think a lot of this relies on the viewer's ability to see or to imagine what that character is seeing. And I just think the image of Kelly looking in that bin and then what she would have been met with honestly would have been pretty terrifying. I don't know if it's a common theme, but I'm really unnerved by dead fish. I do not like dead fish. And just the image of all of these dead goldfish, these 5 dead goldfish in the bottom of the bin, of the trash can, it would have been kind of traumatizing, but very, very funny. And would you believe it? The next fish dies. This is fish number 6 or 7. I've completely lost count. But to be fair, it was Kelly's fault because, and I assume this was intentional to make the execution of the scene smoother, but Patricia Heaton is holding the fish. In fact, she's not even holding the fish bowl. She's got it balanced on her hand. She's not actually holding it. She's balancing it on her hand. And I assume this was intentional so that when Ryan comes in and knocks Kelly with the door, it very easily tumbles out of her hand. And I think it was very well executed. I don't know if it was done in one take or if they had multiple takes, but it's an absolute delight. And I rather enjoyed this episode. As I said, I didn't know it was possible to have a 20-ish minute story basically just about multiple dead goldfish and to make it work. And it was brilliant. And of course, we also have the discussion about Gracie, and I like the fact that we moved a little bit more forward with that. Kelly did acknowledge that when you're pregnant, you have 9 months, give or take, to come to terms with this, whereas Chuck has basically just found out within the last day that he is a father. So of course he's not going to be father of the year or suddenly become responsible overnight. He needs time, and I think Kelly, in that it was a kind of throwaway comment, we didn't give much weight to it, but in that moment I think she was starting to acknowledge these things, which I think is really great. And I'm looking forward to finding out what happens next with that part of the story, looking forward to getting to know the other characters more. Really hope we get a lot more Ryan. I think he's absolutely my favourite, although I love Marsh. It's early days, it's very early days, but aside from Chuck and Kelly, Ryan and Marsh are definitely high up there. Not that I have anything against Montana and Gary, but Ryan and Marsh are pretty awesome. Fish Story is a really brilliant episode. Really thoroughly enjoyed it.